Hello everyone, Tarnished Onryo here, and today I'm going to talk about invaders. For the majority of my time playing FromSoft games, including Elden Ring, I was not an invader. And I found myself often being invaded, especially because I did a lot of co-op, especially in the beginning. And what I've noticed is I had moments where I would be upset whenever I was beaten terribly by an invader and I'd kind of lose my cool and stuff like that. But two things that I've come to understand about that is A, I was coping, truthfully. And B, you never make it personal. I'm going to start this out with a story of back when I played my very first Souls game, Dark Souls 1. And for those of you who have played the earlier games as well, the Souls series, you could be invaded solo in those games. In Dark Souls 1, you just had to pop humanity or restore your humanity, which was basically the equivalent of popping a rune arc in Elden Ring. And in Dark Souls 3, it was the same thing. If you popped an ember, restored your ember, which was basically the same thing as popping a rune arc, that made you invadable. So you could be invaded solo without a cooperator. So you could say, and that time there was more of a reason to feel upset about being invaded because there was the possibility of being invaded solo. Now, there were many times where, like I said before, I would be upset or I'd blame this and that. I blame everything but myself, aka coping. But again, as I said before, I never made it personal. There's a reason that I bring up making it personal, because what I would come to realize when I started finally just deciding I'm just going to get good at invasions. I'm tired of being beaten all the time. I'm tired of always getting destroyed. There's something that they know that I don't, apparently, and I just need to figure it out. So what I started to do is watch other content creators. Not at the time, they weren't other content creators. They were just content creators because I wasn't making any content myself. So I would watch other people, people like G9, Chase the Bro, these days Lost. There are other Fighter PL. There are a lot of Souls players out there who built their channels purely on invasions. And I started to go watch these people so that I could kind of learn what to do, how to optimize. There are a lot of things that I learned that I didn't know in the beginning, such as popping or restoring your humanity or popping an ember, making you invadable in the first place. I didn't know that that was doing that. How to stat yourself out for optimization. Like back in there was a time where I prioritized fashion over everything all the time. And that's really not something you want to do in PvP, because your armor and your stats really matter even more when it's a player versus player, because the other player, the invader, is very likely going to be optimized for PvP, especially if they know what they're doing. Things like that include minimum stats for PvP, like what I would consider to be 60 vigor. In Elden Ring, at least. I don't remember quite the vigor values for Dark Souls series and stuff like that, but things like having a minimum amount of poise, a minimum amount of HP, those things are important in invasions or when being invaded. Otherwise, you could just end up being deleted, stun locked forever. And that's what a lot of people will have complaints about. Is like, oh, I always get constantly stun locked by certain weapons, or I just die in like 2 hits. Understand, those things are often your fault. If you're having those problems, those are often your fault, because poise is a big deal when it comes to PvP. There's only, even with the best poise, you can only tank maybe 1-2 maximum hits from certain weapons before you get stun locked into a combo. And if you have too low poise, you're going to end up endlessly stun locked by certain weapons, and sometimes all weapons. And that's not the fault of the invader. That's your choice of weapons, talismans, and stats in general. The reason I'm really come down to making this video is that as of late, since I've been doing a whole lot of PvP and a lot of invasions, I've been starting to notice a lot more of something that I've never seen, that I never knew even existed. And that's been a lot of hate mail. And hate mail in and of itself is not that big of a deal. Like, if you were just to message me something like "F you" or "you're trash, dog," whatever the case may be, or you're cheating, whatever, that wouldn't be such a big deal, right? But sometimes people take it really, really far. And I bring this up because this has been happening to me from my own invasions lately. I get people who will look up my profile and message me almost nonstop and tell me things like to end myself, or call me things like a serial murderer, or a psychopath, and all kinds of weird things like this, right? And I'm like, because I'm invading in a video game. I'm not making these things up. Like, this is actual things I've been told. Like, I've been called a serial ender. I've been called terrible things, terrible things that normal people shouldn't be saying to other people, simply because I'm invading. Just because I invaded them and I killed them in the game, So people are starting to take these in-game actions and trying to attribute them to my real life. And to be honest, even if it was still just that, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the thing is, I've had people seek out a lot of my other profiles, like my Twitch account, my Facebook, my Instagram. They'll go out of their way to seek my other social media platforms and follow me on there. I remember there was one time that I was streaming on Twitch at the same time that I was invading, and somebody was in there sending me nonstop messages, saying real, like, just terrible things about me, calling me again things like a psychopath, a serial murderer, and just constantly harassing me nonstop. And I'm not very big, so I might have like 2 or 3 viewers at a time. So the only person that's chatting in my chat will be that person. And every time I look over, it's just these terrible things being said about me. And sometimes it's just like, who even are you? Why are you saying these things? And my only guess is it has to be somebody who I'd invaded before, because it's only really started once I started doing invasions. And it's brought me to the point where I've just stopped streaming altogether, because I honestly just really can't handle that feedback. It's too frustrating. It's too stressful for me to just endure all the time. Like, I'm just a person. Like, contrary to what you might believe, I might sound super enthusiastic and excited all the time in invasions and stuff. But that's part of the performance. I don't, if it was just me invading and I wasn't recording, I probably wouldn't be talking at all. I have to force myself to talk so that my invasions aren't so boring, or they don't appear at least as boring, because I personally, when I watch invasion content, I like it when the people talk. And, that's what I want to portray when I'm invading. But honestly, I get frustrated a lot too. It's every time I invade in Elden Ring, it's always at minimum a 1v2, mostly a 1v3, and sometimes even more, because there'll be endless hunters coming in back and forth. And sometimes you'll catch me becoming frustrated. You'll hear me say like, "Oh, freaking hunters," or "You're this, you're that." Like, I'll say something like that. But here's the thing about that is, that's only in game. People have called me out for saying, "Well, you did call this person a coward in the match." Yeah, sure, I did that. And I'm not trying to justify it. No, it's not okay for me to say things like that. But here's the thing about that is, they can't hear me say it. There is no voice chat in Elden Ring invasions. It's not like there's some kind of proximity chat where if I'm near you when I speak, you can hear what I said. The people that invade will never have heard what I've said. And again, it's not terrible things. It'll be something just like, "Oh, like, you coward using a hunter," or, "Oh, crutching these ashes of war," or these spell spams. But that's it. I'm not calling them anything personal. I'm definitely not pulling up their profiles and DMing them or finding their other social media accounts to disparage them personally. I don't make things personal. Every bit of smack talking that I do is always exclusively in game, and there's no possible way that they can hear it. Nobody will ever have heard what I've said about or to them. And I won't, like I said, go out of my way to find them anywhere else to do that. In the comment sections of some of my videos themselves, you will see some people who will do those types of things. And there have been times where I have just flat out have had strings of messages that are just so bad that I've just deleted them, because it didn't only affect me, but other people. Like, dude, how can you be saying things like that? Like, relax, it's just a game, it's just an invasion. And it's creating this space of toxicity that I never intended in the first place and that I didn't want. So I'll just have completely just deleted their messages from my comment sections altogether. And that's something that I've only since I started invading started to notice. And what's a shame is that sometimes some of those people that'll send me these messages will have like YouTube, like YT at the end of their username, or TTV in the end of the username. So they themselves are a content creator or streamer, and they're doing this to other content creators and or streamers. Now, I don't know. I didn't go to see who these people were. I didn't go check their private profiles. I didn't go, check out their Twitches or their YouTube channels, because that's just, again, you don't make these things personal. That's not what you do in these. At least that's the way I see it. You should not be taking these things personal. You should not be making it personal either. So I don't know if these guys have tried to make their own career in streaming or YouTube and it just didn't become successful, and if it's coming out of perhaps jealousy, or I don't know why jealousy. I'm not a big creator by any means. Like I said, in my own Twitch channel, I'll be lucky to have 3 or 4 chatters in at any given time, and on my YouTube channel, I'm still very small. So I don't know what brings people to do that and consider themselves a content creator and or streamer. I find that pretty despicable. But again, I remember there was a time where in Elden Ring itself is so new user friendly, in my opinion. Everything is kind of handed to you, explained for you. For those of you who have played the earlier Souls games, you remember how not straightforward anything was, where it didn't explicitly explain how to use certain tools, how your stats work, how min-maxing work. None of that. I remember back in Dark Souls 1, I only played a strength build, not because I chose a strength build, but because I didn't understand magic, and at the time they were called miracles, not incantations. I didn't understand how those things were, catalysts and staffs, which were, staffs for casting magic, and your tool for casting incantations or miracles, like they were called back in Dark Souls 1. I'm going to call them miracles, staves from now on, and catalysts, because that's what they were called, were catalysts, not whatever they call the tools to cast incantations now. But I didn't understand those things, and like I said, they weren't explicitly explained. And I remember when I first started trying PvP and invasions, I didn't stick with them because I just wasn't very good at them. I took that as a me thing. I'm not good at this, so I'm just not going to do it. But I remember getting invaded, for example, and in Dark Souls 1, there was a spell called Dark Bead. And I remember people would come into my world, invade me, and one-shot me with that spell. Literally, I'm not even playing around. Like, they'd come in, cast Dark Bead, and I'm just instantly deleted. And I started trying to learn, what is this? Why is this happening? How do people do that? And I was starting to look things up on YouTube and on Google, what is, how to PvP, how to do this, how to do that, how to use Dark Bead. And I found out that this spell that was being cast on me was Dark Bead. So I went and I learned how to use a staff, but it still wasn't all that straightforward. And so what I did was I got the minimum amount of intelligence required to use it. And I would try to invade worlds and use Dark Bead. And I would even use the staff that, I don't remember what it was called, but it was a staff that was double the power of your spells, but half the amount of casts. Because that's how That's how casting worked in Dark Souls 1 is you didn't have FP or mana or anything like that. You had a number of casts. So like say, I think Darkbead you could cast 10 times, but with this particular staff, you could only cast it 5 times, but it doubled the power, or maybe it might be 6 and 3. I don't remember the specifics. It's been a long time, but that's how that worked at that time. And even with the reduced amount of casts, I still wasn't doing that much damage. So I was frustrated. I was like, why are people coming into my world one-shotting me, but I'm still doing like minimum damage? And it took so much time for me to start to understand how scaling worked, because that was another thing that wasn't that explicitly explained, scaling, you know? So I started to realize, oh, my spell casting scaling increases with more intelligence, or my miracle scaling also scaled with faith investment. The higher the faith, the more damage, the higher the intelligence, the more damage. But like I said, that really wasn't all that explicitly explained back in those early days, you know? And I think there was like a little explanation menu, but again, it just wasn't that obvious that it was there. So I ended up figuring things out for the most part for myself. Then I got better at it, a little bit better at it in Dark Souls 3, but still not that great. And eventually I did just start to get good at invasions in general, PvP in general. I started to invade and win more. I started to win a lot of my invasion. I started getting pretty good at it. And I started having a lot of fun at it. But the thing is, if we remember, I did start out as the guy who only did PvP or only did co-op or only played solo. I would go out of my way to play through the game solo and unembered or without my humanity, aka without a rune, without a great rune, because I didn't want to be invaded. And this is another problem that I have with co-opers, like dedicated co-opers in general. It's not that I have a problem with co-opers in and of themselves. It's when they start to complain about things that they have control over, like they get mad about they can't play without being invaded. It's like, yes, you can. Just don't co-op. As I will, sometimes I need the help. I was like, okay, well then use a mimic tier. you use a spirit ash. You can't be invaded when you're using a spirit ash. You already have the luxury of being able to great rune yourself, to use a rune arc and get the blessing of a great rune in your world without being invaded. That's a huge win for co-opers in Elden Ring, because again, you couldn't do that in Dark Souls. If you popped humanity or an ember, that made you invadable, even if you were solo. You have the luxury of being able to use a spirit ash. Spirit ash didn't exist in the Souls series. It was either you played the game completely alone, unembered, no humanity, or you co-opt and that made you immediately invadable. And again, not even co-op specifically. It could also have just been having your humanity restored, aka having your great rune activated. That made you invadable. So you had to work with the bare minimum in the earlier Souls games and play solo if you never wanted to be invaded. So take that into consideration. The fact that you can just use spirit ashes and great rune yourself for free and still stay uninvadable. I really would recommend if playing the earlier Souls games so you can see what that really feels like. Not being able, having to really play through the game by yourself completely without any help or great runes, and see that I think this is what gets me to have a cooler head when I was playing PvP or co-op and PvP in Elden Ring, is always realizing, man, they really do give it to you easy in Elden Ring. You know, a lot of people complain about how difficult Elden Ring is, and I won't lie. The DLC can feel overwhelming, but what I'd come to realize is that if you just keep up with your upgrade items the way you're supposed to, or the way that they intended you to, and you can feel the way you want to feel about the upgrade system in the DLC. That's fine. I get it. You know, like, oh, you shouldn't have to. Some people feel like you shouldn't have to be seeking all around the world for Shadow Tree fragments to get yourself stronger. But the reality of that is it's the DLC's version of leveling up. And when I started getting tired of getting beaten time after time after time by bosses in the DLC, I just said, forget it. I'm gonna go running around, look for Shadow Tree fragments. And guess what that did? It trivialized the game for me. I started to one or two try bosses that took people count. The only boss that I couldn't kill in one or two tries was the final boss. That is that's just a ridiculous boss fight, the final boss. But bosses like Bale and which I came back to like at the very end because I forgot they were there. Commander Gaius. It didn't take me more than, I think I beat Gaius on my first try and Bale on my second. Because at the time that I got to them, I was at Shadow Tree Fragment plus 19. I was just one away from max. And my Revered Spirit Ashes were also at 20. So I went in and yeah, I did use Spirit Ashes for a lot of my fights too. And I summoned Egon and stuff for the Bale fight. And the thing is, I don't care what anybody thinks about my how I play the bosses or how I fight the bosses. I don't have this feeling of if oh, you're not good unless you do X, Y, and Z thing. I don't care about that kind of stuff. I just, I like the game for what it is. I'm gonna play it the way, and I've already suffered through it in the earlier, like I said, in the earlier Souls games where I did do the entirety of these games solo because I didn't want to be invaded. Back at the time where I wasn't good at PvP and I didn't want to get good at it. And again, that was a me thing. I took responsibility for that. I don't want to be good at PvP. I am not having fun with it. And I'm not going to sit here and cope, even though sometimes I did. I did have my cope moments. But again, never made it personal. It was I always accepted it as a me thing. Unless they were blatantly cheating. And you can tell when that's happening. But that doesn't often happen. Most people don't come into your world blatantly cheating. So what I've come to the realization of is that whenever it came to, even though you might see my own frustration sometimes, I always in the end accepted it as this is a me thing and I'm coping. And it sometimes will take me a little while to understand that. And even in my own invasions today, I will still find times where I get frustrated. But like I said earlier in the video, I will never make it personal. I'll never come out and outright find your profile, private message you, seek out your social media accounts. And I can't stress that enough, how I've had people come in to my Twitch streams, into my Discord, into my YouTube comment sections, even my Instagram and Facebook. I don't even give people access to my Facebook. I don't know how they found these. My Instagram, my YouTube, my Twitch, sure. But my Facebook, that's the one that shocked me, is how far people will go to seek out my personal things because I beat them in an invasion. I don't think people understand how serious these things can get for some people, because for me, I can kind of, to an extent, understand or to an extent tolerate it and just be like, it's just a game. It's not serious, and nothing they say means anything. It's not true, that's for sure. But I do also have my own limits when it comes to that kind of thing, because I myself am neurodivergent. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, into details, but I tend to feel things at a bit of a deeper level than other people. So there are times where it leaves me in a distraught sort of state of mind, where I will give up on things like streaming because I've already done that. I haven't been back on my Twitch in quite a long time, and when I tried, I didn't have the motivation to continue it, to complete my stream, because I couldn't stop thinking of that time when that person came into my chat and just started calling me terrible things back to back with just the intentions of hurting me, you know, like emotionally, just because I invaded him once and beat him. I don't know where I'm going with this now, but I guess what I want to say to those of you who hate invaders, try to understand the person that is invading you is a person too, you know? And the way I see it, the reason I invade it, a lot of people, they tell me things like I invade to hurt them or to piss them off, or because I hate people, or things like, or because, like I said, people that have blatantly told me things like because I'm a serial murderer or because I'm a psychopath. I've been called things like because I'm a narcissist. And I was like, okay, because I'm doing things in a video game? Try to remember that these people are human beings too. And they've probably been in the same position you were at as well, because I don't know many people who are invaders who started the game invading. I really don't think that's a thing. I played these games for years before I started trying to get comfortable with invasions, you know, and I was a dedicated co-opper myself, and I even facilitated ganks at some points, at some times, and in Elden Ring as well. I think that one of the background things that I showed in this video itself was me in co-ops ganking invaders with the Hand of Millennia. No, I did. One of the videos in this is me ganking invaders with the Hand of Millennia. And those were some of my earlier times in this game. So, but the thing is, like, I always wanted the next thing, you know, like there came a point where just playing the game itself wasn't enough. You know, I started to get bored. I wanted another challenge, a new challenge. And that new challenge would often be things like, now I want to start soloing the game. So I did that. But then that got boring. I was like, well, what's the next thing? And PvP always tends to be the next level of end game, at least in my opinion, when it comes to these games, when it comes to the Soul series and Elden Ring. You might have heard other people say this, but it's sort of an endless gameplay loop, because every new person is a new person, you know? New person with new experience, with new play styles. You can't invade one person and just automatically know what they're going to play like. Everybody's different. They're all going to be using something different. And they'll have one or two other co-opers with them who are going to have also their own unique play style. So everything is in the moment learning. And that's exciting to me. I love that feeling of adapting to the situation in the moment. You know, that gives me a new level of dopamine that I can no longer get from single player play or co-op play. You know, those run their course. And for those of you who are still just doing that for the first time, I get it. You know, if you haven't been burnt out on that content, understandable. You know, like I've been playing the game for thousands of hours, so I have just had my burnout of those experiences. And if you haven't reached that yet, then that's totally fine. I'm not even saying things like co-oping are bad, ganking are bad. I used those myself. Hunting, as you can see in this video right here, clip in the background, I'm hunting, PvP, co-oping and ganking. I used those to start getting good at PvP in general. And it came to a point where I started to realize I want more. I think I found myself in situations where I think I could have beaten that person in a 1v1. I feel like I could have beaten that person by myself. I feel like I could have been in his position and taken us on 2v1 and won that fight. Like this guy in this invasion right here. I remember feeling in this exact invasion, I feel like I could have killed me in that situation. I feel like if I was him, I could have won this fight. And I wanted that experience for myself. So guess what I did? I did it. I just did it. I started invading. It was frustrating. It was tough. I lost a lot of invasions at the beginning. A lot of my first invasions were colossal failures. But as you'll see, if you're even willing to see, in my invasion videos, you'll see that I consistently win a lot of 2 and 3v1s, a lot of gang situations, and sometimes even nonstop incoming hunters, along with the co-opers and the host themselves. And you have to remember, you have the advantage of as the host. You get full flasks. You get the opportunity to pop your rune arc, you get to have hunters come in nonstop. You get to have your co-ops. And if you're still losing, despite all these blatant advantages that you have, you really have to take into consideration and understand it's just a skill issue at this point. Don't, like, you need to quit coping and understand it's just, you need to get better at it. You need to get better at the PvP, because this was me too. I was getting killed in my own worlds by much better invaders because they were just good at PvP. They knew what they were doing, And I wanted that for myself. So I did it. I just started invading. I started learning. I started watching. Here's the best advice I can give to you. Watch other PvP content creators, specifically invaders. For me, it was people like, I think I mentioned earlier, people like Chase the Bro, like G9, like Fighter PL, people like that who, there are many more, but I can't remember them all right off the bat right now, that you could watch, that'll teach you, and they'll even explain to you. So there are some people that'll explain to you things like frame data, things like like hyper armor, things like super armor. There's so much that you can learn that'll, in and of itself, make you a better PvPer in general, not just invader, but a better PvPer in general, because that's where I initially took this knowledge, was into co-op and hunting and in ganks. I was testing this new knowledge and these new theories out in gank situations or co-op situations to get comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with using these things to get comfortable with your newfound knowledge. And once you get comfortable, start to take it out into invasions. And you'll start to realize, man, I'm actually pretty decent at this, or I'm getting better at the very least. And you'll become that PvP god eventually. And sometimes I still go back. Sometimes I'll still go back and do hunts, or I'll do PvP or co-op. And usually I'll be kind of respectful about it. I'll let them do their thing. I'll be like, yeah, let's do a 1v1. Or I'll let the host 1v1 them. But if I start to realize, man, this invader is really good, then I'll get in on that and just, take over the fight to try to get the 1v1 with the invader myself, while the host goes in, because if I see that the host is just about to get instantly deleted, I'll jump in and be like, hey, yo, no, fight me. Let's do it. Let's do it, me and you. And I'll square off really good with these other invaders. And this is when you're going to start realizing invasions aren't that bad if you just learn to PvP yourself. And how do you learn to PvP? Just start doing invasions of yourself. Watch other YouTube content creators or other Elden Ring content creators yourself, and start taking their stories, their information, their advice into account and applying it into your own games. And there are a lot of things that I think are a minimum requirement, like your poise stats, like your vigor stats. I really don't think that you should ever be PvPing or invading in general without minimum 60 vigor, a minimum poise value of I think it's like 91. I don't know. See, I'm not the big data guy when it comes to invasions, but you can find those people out there who will teach you these types of things. And yeah, I guess that's my biggest thing about the invader drama when it comes to this game. I guess in conclusion, understand that the people that are invading you are also human. The majority of are there some assholes? Sure, but I don't think the majority of people who invade are. And if you start watching more invasion content creators, you'll start to realize that yourself. And additionally, try it for yourself. You might start to realize that not only are you going to enjoy it, but it's making you a better player overall. And it's a satisfying feeling. It really is. But anyways, if you made it up to this point in the video, I highly appreciate you. Thank you so much. Let me know some of your own experiences with PvP, if you love it or hate it, if you'd like to get into it. And in the end of the day, please just remember, don't make it personal. Until the next time, I'll see you in the next videos, and thank you for watching.